Hello, welcome to CLSP Politics. So, I decided that I wanted my subscribers to know more than the future Secretary of Defense. That's not a heavy lift. I'm almost certain we can do it. Guy's a moron. All right. He had no idea what ASEAN was. And so this is a study guide for Hegseth. So let's get busy. Uh, So it's an association of Southeast Asian nations. It's an economic bloc that the United States has helped create so that there could be economic cooperation amongst all of these different countries. And the countries are also big parts of it. I mean, the US was kind of a, hey, it'd be really great if you guys did this. And then they're like, okay. And then over the time it's grown. And not all these countries are in the same place as the other countries, and some have some real political issues. But I'd like to kind of just walk through what it is how each country is, how it works, where their economy's at, and just kind of give you guys an idea of what this part of the world kind of is up to, and it's going to be a huge part of where the United States is going, really over the next 20 years. So this is, and I mean, I subscribe to the theory that China demographically is cooked. I doubt they'll have enough workers in 8 years to compete with most of these countries, and I'd like to show you why. But so this is my little review of ASEAN. So real quick history on U.S. security and economics. So after World War II, the United States was the only country with any real navy, and we realized that we could do what every other country that had won a war did, and that's basically create an empire, or we could do something different. Now, it really comes down to one guy who scared the crap out of the United States in 1946. That was Stalin. We had no interest to fight the Red Army in any part of Europe or fight anything in any part of Europe at that point, because we just got out of World War II. And we realized that the only way we'd really be able to deal with them is to isolate them economically. So what we did was we bribed everyone, all the countries that would side with us, including China, India, the countries in Europe for sure. We were like, listen, we're the only navy left on the planet, right? 1946, everyone else's navy is cooked. We've got about 800 destroyers, and we know how to use them. So we said, we will clear and make sure that your lanes for commerce, where you put stuff on a ship, it's guaranteed to get to that location as long as the ship doesn't sink from act of God and what have you. But no pirates, no other countries are going to interfere as long as you side with us and against the Soviet Union. And that was what we did till 1992, when the Soviet Union collapsed. So for us, the global economy was never a economic issue. It was a security issue. I mean, even today, we never really vested in the international economy. We're maybe 10-15% of our production goes to things outside of our country. We're an exporter of food. We're an exporter of energy. We bring in a couple of rare earths from a few different places. Canada mostly is where we get a lot of our potash for fertilizer and things like that. But we are kind of a bubble unto ourselves. That's why when everyone else had this huge inflation boom, yeah, we had inflation too, but it was nothing compared to what was going on outside the United States or Mexico or Canada, interestingly. You got to love NAFTA too. So we were able to kind of insulate ourselves from all that. And we've been insulating ourselves for a long, long time. We became, energy independent by around 2009, 2010. Um, so when we fought the war in Iraq, it wasn't for oil for the United States. Even that's what you had a bunch of moron Republicans saying. No, it was for oil for our allies. You know, uh, and once Russia was Russia and no longer the Soviet Union, we said, okay, you're friends now. So why are we patrolling the oceans for free for the entire global community again? Because it was never an economic issue. It was always a security issue. So now that there's no Soviets, what are we doing? So from pretty much 92 on, the number of destroyers that we've had in our Navy has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. Until now we're about 70. Went from 800 to 70. And those 70 guard our aircraft carriers. And aircraft carriers aren't really for patrolling the sea lanes. They're for taking out countries. They have a different job. Because really patrolling the sea lanes was never really for us. The trillions and trillions of tax dollars in our deficit that went to the Navy to control the sea lanes really over the last 2 decades was really kind of a gift to the world. You're welcome. But it's not something we're super interested in anymore as a country. And that's because we've continued to elect politicians that, America first, or they're very, populist. We're looking inward. We're not looking outward because there's no real economic reason for us to. Our demography says we have plenty of people to sell to in our own country. So that's kind of how that all went. But we do have a vested interest in a few other countries outside of ours. So we've got the 4 eyes, which is England, New Zealand, Israel, and America, that we do a lot of sharing of intelligence. And we have treaties with Japan and Australia. We have really good relationships with different groups. Well, ASEAN's one of those groups. Now, we don't have a great relationship with every country in Asia, but that's kind of how we've worked. It's better to do carrots instead of stick. Stick's really expensive first, and carrot doesn't really cost us anything but growing the economy, which we benefit from because we do all the higher end, and then there's the countries that do the middle, and then there's countries that do the lower end stuff. And you've got China, which is really good at middle and lower. But if they're not designing AI circuitry, the US is designing AI circuitry, having it built and designed, manufactured with help from the United States for chemicals and materials in Asia. And we need good Asian partners. That's why we're friends with Singapore and Vietnam. But we're going to talk about a few of these countries in this video. That was just a quick review of where we were, how we got here, and what we're really, really up to. So ASEAN is made up of Brunei, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Now, not all of these countries are the same, of course. They all have a lot of different cultural issues, but they're all real geographically close to each other, and they're separated by oceans and jungles and mountains. So they've really never gone to hardcore war with one another because they just really couldn't reach each other, and there just wasn't a reason to. So they don't have a lot of baggage like you find in different parts of Asia, which is convenient when you want them all to work together and coordinate. Just real quick, ASEAN has 650 million people in it, a GDP of 3 trillion. It's not a whole lot as compared to the US, which is 27 trillion, or China, which is 17 trillion. So, but they're also not a huge population. They're about twice the population of the United States, but they're spread out over all those different countries. And you understand there's a lot of water. I mean, the Philippines is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of islands. So coordinating and getting all those and the infrastructure necessary to make these countries work it's not going to be spread out evenly, put it that way. So real quick, let's look at some of their growth, right? So this is kind of the last 2 years. What you got here is you got Malaysia and you've got Vietnam just killing it. They're in the top. You've got Indonesia, which is doing pretty good, and you've got the Philippines, which is also doing pretty well. And then, of course, you've got like Singapore and Thailand, which are kind of just figuring it out. But we're going to look at demography on each of these countries, and I'm going to show you that there's really two different groups. One that is about to industrialize, and ones that have industrialized about 20 years ago. And you can actually see it, and I'll explain to you how you can see that here in a minute. So yeah, let's look at the population demography of each country. Countries on the verge of economic development. So first off, you've got the Philippines. This is what a pre-industrial population demography looks like. You know, you've got lots of tons of young people at the bottom, and it kind of shoots up. And this is what it looks like before the majority of the population moves into cities. And there's really like Manila and a few other cities in the Philippines, but there's a ton of islands that are pretty much rural. They're fishing villages. They do some livestock, but you know, they're having lots of babies, because when you live on a farm, kids are free labor. Kids help you keep the farm going. And the more you have, the better, you know, because they're your people, and they're going to make sure that the pigs get fed and the rice gets done, and the fish get caught, and you have your rural economy. And you need lots of people for that, because it's heavy on the labor, and you're talked about farm to market. It's farm to house. There's no market really. And if there is one, it's a local market, which is down the street, and it's been down the street for 100 years, and that's where it's always been. So the Philippines, Myanmar to a point, but I would like to show you that if you look at they're already starting to have fewer children, and that's because they're beginning. They do a lot of textiles, and people are moving into cities where you get they're just sort of the floor plan to handle 8 children. You can maybe have 1 or 2. Now we're just starting to see that. We call that a stovepipe when it kind of levels out. It's called a stovepipe. Cambodia, same thing. You can see some chunks have been taken out. And that's because Cambodia has had a couple of wars and some other things that happened when, let's say, people that are in their 50s now were in their 20s 30 or 40 years ago. Maybe they've had some issues, and you can see that in their birth rate. But there's still more people below than there are above, because they're still largely rural, and they're having lots of babies because babies make sense. 8 kids make sense in rural environment. Laos, same thing. Farming communities. You've got they're just beginning to begin to move into cities and really begin to make that kind of transition, but still got the pyramid. Real quick, just like to thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe if you wish to support this channel. We have a PayPal account at CLSB Politics. Every penny counts, and we really do appreciate it. That's my commercial. Also, just remind everybody, YouTube does not monetize me. I don't get anything from any of the commercials that you may see on my channel. YouTube just is not, they're just not doing it. So, and believe me, I've gone down the rabbit hole with them. Apparently, they don't like the stuff that I talk about, or it's not interesting enough. I don't know. Doesn't matter. I appreciate that you guys like it. Countries that have urbanized and in the middle of economic development, and you'll see a big difference between these two demographic breakdowns. So, can anyone guess how many years ago Vietnam began to industrialize? Well, it was about 30 years ago. My father actually lived in Vietnam for quite a while, and in the 90s, when it was just starting, they'd kind of kicked all the Russians out, more or less, and they were kind of starting to do things on their own. They kicked the Chinese out in the 70s. So it's so you can see that they've had a tightening of their demography, because there are fewer 24-year-olds than there are 25-year-olds, and you see that cut. That's how you know they've started to urbanize. They have moved from the farms into cities where it makes more sense to have 2 kids as opposed to 8, because kids are expensive furniture in a city, whereas in a farm they actually do stuff. Again, Malaysia, same thing. Literally almost exactly the same time that Vietnam started. You see them cut in, and they're even cutting even more at the base there, because they are looking at more people moving into cities. Same story. Singapore, same story. Singapore's actually got a bit of a problem. So I'm going to use Singapore as an example here. They so when you're the biggest group that consumes, that are customers for the market, basically happen from 18 to 35. That's when you're buying cars, buying houses, having kids, spending money, spend. You're working 2 jobs. You've got to cover your debts. You're a customer and you are consuming, and then you hit, and 40 and 50 is when, in theory, the kids have moved out and now it's just you and your wife. You're not going to be consuming as much, but you now have 20 or 30 years of experience. So now your income's higher and now you're making more money. Creates a better tax base, right? Well, Singapore's got a problem. Got the same problem that not as bad as China, because China is way worse. Singapore didn't have that one-child policy for 40 years. China's demography is a time bomb. Right now, Mexico has better ROI for workers than China. The only reason China is even playing in the economic sphere anymore, the only reason they have $17 trillion GDP, is because of the $37 trillion that was invested in infrastructure for companies and manufacturing over the last 40 years. That's why. Without that, they'd be cooked. Singapore's got some problems. They don't have a lot of young people. They've got a lot of people in the middle. I'll blow it up again. Between the ages of 30 and 50. And as that group moves forward, so they're about to get into their super solid tax base universe, right? And as that group moves forward and it moves up, they're just not having any more kids, because they live in high rises. Maybe a 1-bedroom, maybe 2-bedroom, maybe they have 1 kid. They're not replacing their population. So you're seeing a real reduction in population manufacturing, which means that they're going to have to figure out a way to change their economy. So Brunei has a big chunk taken out of it, but you can see they're trying to recover. And I've got to go look at Brunei a little bit more to figure out what they're doing to change that demographic. But whatever they're doing, it's working. Now they're going to have a real problem in about 30 or 40 years, where they're going to have a real drop off of that sweet tax base between 40 and 55. But they're going to have workers coming in after that, which will be fine, because then they're going to have consumers for their products and workers for their industry. So they're going to have a dry spell there as their 19 to 20-year-olds kind of move through that small little generation. But then they look like they're recovering. So Brunei's great. Thailand, same problem. Their population's demography is shrinking. Right now, they're in their heyday. Thailand's killing it economically, but their tax base is great. They have a worker age group in their 30s that are being dynamic and inventing and doing new things. but they got a real problem coming down the pipe in 20 years. So that's kind of the breakdown. I got a quote: "Do not let ASEAN become the play card of for the competition among major countries." That's the president of Vietnam. What he's saying there is they all need to stick together because China's not going to be China forever. This group will be the new China in 20 years. Unfortunately, we need them to be the new China in about 8. But I don't really think they're going to have the infrastructure or the mature enough economy to really get that done. But, you know, adversity makes opportunity. So perhaps they can pull it off. I mean, I hope so. We're going to need them. We're going to need Mexico. We're going to need Canada for the next 30 or 40 years to, you know, to do the green revolution, to do the new economies, and to deal with the world as it changes. So, again, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. If you wish to support this channel, we have an account on PayPal. Like to throw out if anyone has any ideas for shows, I'm about to go on the road again. I'm heading back to Wisconsin to work on a Supreme Court race. So I will be in the blue north. I will have lots of inside time to do research. So if there's something that you guys would like me to look at, be more than happy to. But the most important thing about this video is now you know more than the future Secretary of Defense. Sorry, but that's where we're at. Okay. Hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. Sean Briscoe out.